Chapter 13. King Royal was angry, very angry. His eyes burned with fury, and his broad face was stern and cold. The mud-caked, mutilated bodies of his men and the cattle that had died in the stampede lay drying in the mid-morning sun. Off in the distance, he could see scattered specks of dark shapes moving in the sunlight. These were only a lingering part of the herd. The rest had been scattered out of sight. It would take a lot of men and a lot of work to round them up again. Harka had already detailed several men to attend to the bodies of the fallen ranch hands. King paced back and forth in the wet grass, occasionally stopping and gazing off into the distance. He was not a man to blame himself for anything, but the men who had died here for $1 a day job certainly did not deserve to have their lives cut short this way. He didn't bother to turn as Johnny stepped up to his side, but he knew the young man was there. "Darrow's going to pay for this, Johnny," he said. "Too many men have died." "That's right," Johnny said flatly. "Too many. On both sides. How many more have to die?" King finally turned to face him. He tried to hide the sudden surprise on his face as he noticed Johnny had slid the pistol and belt that King had given him last week around to his left so the pistol would be butt forward. On his right hip, riding low, was a gleaming black holster hanging from a wide matching cartridge belt. It was well oiled and had been cut partially away, leaving room for the stag-horn pistol butt and the trigger guard of a well-worn 6-gun to protrude out and away from his thigh, where his hand could quickly snatch the weapon. King noted how the trigger had been tied back. The fancy pistol wasn't there when they rode out to the range this morning, so it must have been in his saddlebag all along. Apparently, the sight of the dead riders and the destruction here today had prompted him to put it on. King said nothing to indicate he noticed anything different about him, just as he had refrained from asking about the bruise on Johnny's face, but somehow he felt the young man had come to a decision of sorts. "That's up to Darrow," King said impassively. "And you," Johnny stated, then added, "what about Corday?" "Oh, Sam's an old fool. Darrow is the one to worry about. He's the one behind this mess." He nodded toward the scene of destruction in front of him. "We need proof," Johnny said. "If we just go after him, a lot of people are going to die. We need to do this legal and proper." As much as he hated to say it, or think it, Johnny said, "We need to bring the sheriff into this. Get a warrant issued and bring Darrow in for trial. But as I said, first we need proof he was behind this, so I think we ought to get on the trail of those Jehus that jumped the herd right away before the trail dries up completely." "All right, son," King agreed. "We're going to need all the men we've got to round up the herd, so it will have to be just you and me and Harka on the trail." At first, the trail was fairly easy to follow. The tracks of 5 horses showed plainly in the red clay mud, and they were headed due west. As noon approached, the trail became harder to see as the warming sun dried the tracks. It was still an easy read for Harka, though, and it soon became evident that the attackers were headed toward the town of Green River. With the trail this clear, they could push their mounts along at a fairly fast pace. With any luck, they would find their quarry still in town when they got there. They were about 2 miles from Green River when it happened. As they rode through a narrow, twisting pass, a rifle cracked from the bluff on the left side of the trail. But, just an instant before, the ever-vigilant Harka had detected a glint of sunlight on the rifle barrel. He shouted warning and crashed his horse into the side of King's mount, pushing him over to bump into Johnny's horse. Harka's paint horse reared on 2 legs, horse and rider now between the rifle and the royals. The bullet whizzed past Harka, slicing the air just under his chin, angling high and missing both Johnny and King Royal as their horses thrashed about. Harka had his rifle out by the time his horse came down on all 4 feet. He fired 3 times in rapid succession at the top of the bluff. He couldn't see the assailant, but he hoped his firepower would keep the attacker from firing again, at least keep him from firing accurately. Johnny whipped his horse around, crowding in front of King's horse. He now had his rifle out and spurred his mount closer to Harka. The rifle on the bluff bellowed again, twice, so close together that it sounded almost as one. King yelped with pain. His horse shied, and the old man slumped from the saddle onto the trail. Johnny saw the hit out of the corner of his eye, but the rifleman was the first order of business. He fired back after the assailant, levering round after round into his Winchester. With both he and Harka firing a fusillade of lead at the top of the bluff, there was no more return fire from the riflemen. Finally, realizing it was over, they ceased firing. Harka remained vigilant, watching the bluff for any movement or sign the ambusher was still there. Johnny Neck reined his horse to where King lay on his side. He sheathed his rifle, dismounted, ran to his side and turned the elder Royal, lifting his shoulders up. "Don't look so glum, kid," King Royal joked. "I may still be alive, but maybe they'll do a better job next time." Johnny grimaced. "You old faker. He didn't even touch you." "Wrong there, kid." King rolled to the side, revealing a gaping wound in his left thigh. Blood was gushing out heavily. Nasty wound, Johnny thought. Have to stop the bleeding. He ripped the old man's pant leg away from the bullet hole. "I paid a good $1 for those breeches," King complained. "Then pay another good $1 for another pair. You've got it." Johnny whipped off his bandana and stuffed it into the wound. He then went to his horse and retrieved pigging strings from the saddlebags. He returned to King and used them as a tourniquet. He lifted King to a sitting position. "This will have to do until we get to Green River. Think you can ride?" "Of course I can ride," the old man blustered, trying to pull himself to his feet. Johnny half lifted him. King tried to shake him off at first, but the pain shot through him like a torch and he winced. "Don't need your help," King growled, more angry at himself. Harka had angled his horse close and looked down at the struggling pair. He still held his rifle in one hand by the trigger guard and stock. Johnny said to him, "We've got to get him into town and see a doc." Harka nodded, waved his rifle in half salute, whipped his paint horse around, and rode off toward the bluff. Johnny and King watched him go. "I wouldn't want to be in that Jehu's boots when Harka catches up to him." King smiled through his pain. By the time they reached Green River, King was hunched over the saddle, hardly able to hang on. His face had drained of all color, and his eyes were blank. His leg was now a bloody mess, and blood dripped along the trail behind his horse. Johnny had to halt them twice on the way, to help him shift in the saddle and prop him up. At the second stop, he used his remaining pigging strings to tie the old man's hands to the saddle horn, and used rope to tie his feet together under his horse's belly. They rode directly to Doc Tatum's office, which was in his white frame house at the edge of town. King grumbled and complained the whole time Johnny helped him inside, and while Doc Tatum got him settled and started to work on him. Knowing he had put the elder Royal in good hands, and there was nothing he could do to help, Johnny hurried into the heart of town to the sheriff's office. Luck was with him, for Sheriff Stryker was in his office when he arrived. Johnny quickly told him about the barbed wire incident with Darrow and Corday and the attack on the herd, resulting in the deaths of several of the Royal Crown's hands. He told him of the ambush on the trail and leaving a wounded King Royal with the doctor. Stryker listened intently, and though he had noticed the fancy gun rig that Johnny now sported, he made no mention of it. "I heard about the incident with the fence," Stryker said after Johnny finished his story. "Darrow and Corday have already been here clamoring for me to do something about it. Darrow claims you are a gunman that King brought in and passed off as his son. He says the 4 men you killed yesterday didn't have a chance against you. Is that right?" "They were about to shoot King. I got them first." "No, son," Stryker clarified. "I mean, are you a gunman masquerading as King's son?" "What do you think?" Johnny answered flatly. "Oh, I think you are King's son, all right," the sheriff said. "But that doesn't mean you're not a gunman, too. That's a mighty fancy rig you got there." He motioned toward the pistol belt. "You weren't sporting that before." "No," Johnny said. "I don't like to wear this, but I do know how to use it when I have to. And trouble has escalated since the last time you saw me." Then he quickly changed the subject. "I came here for your help. If those men who attacked the herd last night are still in town, I want you with me if I find them. I want everything done legal, and if they are still in town, we ought to be getting after them right away." Stryker smiled and stood up from his desk. "You're right." He reached for his hat. "Consider yourself duly deputized. Let's go." The town of Green River seemed to be going about its business as usual for a midweek day. The usual townspeople and business owners bustled about. Wagons from nearby ranches were parked along the street's thoroughfare in front of stores and were being loaded with supplies and other needed goods. A few riders on horseback rode in and out of town casually, but for the most part, traffic was light. Hitch rails in front of the various saloons and entertainment houses were practically empty, since most area cowboys were busy working during the day. As Johnny and Ben Stryker strode down the board sidewalk, they noticed an unusual gathering of horses for this time of day, tied at the hitch rails outside the Golden Calf Saloon. There were 5 horses there, the same number Johnny had been tracking all day. It could just be a coincidence, or perhaps the owners of those horses didn't even ride together. Besides, there should have been only 4 horses, since one of the attackers had stayed behind to ambush them on the trail. Or did he? For all Johnny knew, it could have been someone else. He thought about Luke Thorne for an instant, then forced the thought from his mind. Johnny looked each of the horses over carefully. They all had different brands, but they were all Texas brands. Their coats were all matted and dirty. Their hocks and flanks were coated with mud. Johnny ran a hand over the rump of one of the horses. Red clay stuck to his fingers. He held them out for Stryker to see. The sheriff nodded and hitched his holster a little higher, then stepped up onto the saloon porch and pushed through the batwing doors. Johnny wiped his fingers on the leg of his jeans as he followed him inside. The place was practically empty except for the 5 boisterous men at the bar, their backs to the door as Stryker and Johnny came in. They were all dressed in slovenly range clothes, and they all wore low-hanging pistol belts with guns. The one in the center wore 2 pistol belts buckled across one another. The gun on the left thigh hung butt forward for a cross-draw position. Their laughter and language was harsh, and they slopped their drinks on the bar. The short, rotund bartender with a hairless scalp wiped frantically at the mess without complaints. He looked obviously nervous and distraught. "You men own those muddy horses out there?" Ben Stryker boomed with menace and authority in his voice. The men at the bar suddenly went quiet. They were looking straight ahead at the mirror behind the bar. They could clearly see the 2 men standing behind them and the star on Stryker's vest. They turned slowly to face the lawman. The one in the center had coal-black curly hair that fell beneath the brim of his hat onto a bony forehead. His eyes were dark, and a scar ran along his left cheek. "That's right," he said, smiling broadly and looking past Stryker at Johnny. "What about it?" Johnny was stunned. He knew these men and had ridden with them. This was Pike Grant and his gang. Chapter 14. "Who are you and where'd you come from?" Stryker demanded. "Is there a problem here?" Pike retorted. "I'm asking the questions here," the sheriff growled with annoyance. His hand rested on his gun butt. Pike glanced at Johnny and smiled, then said to Stryker, "I wish I knew what this is all about, but if you must know, the name is Dutch Morgan, and these are my brothers." "You don't look like brothers to me," Ben said. "Well, we can't help it if Ma got around some." "All right, so you're brothers. What are you doing in Green River?" "Just passing through, heading back to Texas. Came up north with a trail herd last fall. Wintered at the Boxo in Montana. Now we're heading south, hoping to tie up with another herd moving north. Where were you last night? Stryker demanded. On the trail. Got caught in the storm and rode in here to dry out. The barkeep opened up early just for us. Isn't that right, barkeep? The nervous little man gulped it out. Why, yes, Sheriff, that's right. We were just having a last snort when you came in, Sheriff, Pike said. Me and my brothers were just about to move on. He paused a beat, then added, unless you got any objections, Sheriff. Stryker leaned back and whispered to Johnny, want me to hold them? Johnny was still staring straight ahead at Pike and his men. He could see taunting looks on their faces. We've got no proof against them, and unless they're working for Darrow, why would they just run off the herd? No, maybe we ought to let them go and see if they really ride on. Stryker sighed. I hate to agree, but I think you are right, son. The sheriff turned back to Pike. Then I suggest you men get going now. Make sure you keep on traveling. Pike shook his head. You sure are unfriendly around here, he said. Come on, boys, let's get out of here. He swaggered toward the door, and the others followed with disdain on their faces. They brushed past the sheriff and Johnny arrogantly. As Pike came close to Johnny, he smiled wryly, reached out and slapped him on the shoulder. Hanging around with this old law dog could get you in a lot of trouble someday, Sonny. He pushed on through the bat wings with the others following close behind. Johnny and the sheriff stood looking over the bat wings, watching them mount up and ride off, heading south out of town. I don't like it, Johnny, Stryker said after the 5 riders disappeared from view. They're gunnies if I ever saw one. You notice how that Morgan fella, if that is his name, tried to prod you. I'm glad you stood your ground and let it go. So am I, Johnny agreed, thinking, oh, Sheriff, if you only knew. Then he added, by letting them go, and they show up working for Darrow, we'll have a good case against them. Yes, but it still won't prove anything, and if we can't get this thing settled before King's on his feet again, I'm afraid he'll go after Darrow on his own, and this whole country is going to break wide open. I'm afraid you're right on that, Johnny agreed. You're King's friend. See if you can keep him here in town a while. At least until his leg heals. In the meantime, I think I'll trail those hombres a while and see that they leave the territory. Wait a minute, Johnny. If there is any trailing to do, I'm the sheriff here. Johnny interrupted. Don't worry. I'm not going to brace them. Just see if they are up to anything. I'll come right back and report to you as soon as I'm certain they're gone. Stryker chewed on that for a while, then nodded. I suppose that's okay, but make sure there's no shooting without me around. You can count on that, Johnny said flatly. The 5 riders had a good head start by the time Johnny and Stryker returned to the sheriff's office. Johnny quickly mounted up and rode out of town after them. Once outside the town limits, he spurred his bronc into a gallop, kicking up a cloud of dust in the gravelly trail. He had not ridden 5 minutes, when as he rounded a bend in the trail, a lariat snaked out from alongside the road behind him, and its loop settled over his head and shoulders. At the speed he was riding, the loop drew tight instantaneously, pinning his arms tight to his sides, leaving him no room to reach for his pistol. The horse seemed to fly out from under him as the rope lifted him from the saddle, and he fell heavily on his back onto the stone-strewn trail. The gravel stones seemed to chew into his spine, and he wretched with pain. As his attackers ran to him, the loop slackened. Johnny's hand reached for his holster, but too late. A boot clamped down on his hand and held it in the dirt. Pike Grant looked down at him, holding a shooter inches from Johnny's head. Good to see you again, kid, he said with a chuckle, as he lifted the kid's weapons from his holsters. Then he released his foot and stepped back, sheathing his own Colt. The kid sat up, lifting the loop off his head and shoulders. He glared at Pike. Sorry to be so rough, kid, but I know you too well to take any chances with you, Pike said, offering him a hand to help him up. The kid refused it and pushed himself to his feet. Oh, now, kid, don't be like that. We're glad to see you again. Aren't we boys? The kid looked to each one of them. Leo Pratt, Butch Kenyon, Daryl Porter, and Ike Mannon. Well, excuse me if I'm not glad to see you. We can understand that, kid, Pike chided. You've got a good thing going here. With any luck, you'll wind up the new king of this range. You'll be a wealthy man. Just what do you know about that? The kid demanded. Just that you're passing yourself off as Johnny Royal. Tell me, what happened to Johnny? I can't believe you had a falling out and you iced him yourself. That isn't your style. We were running from a posse and he took a hit. We got away, but he died on the trail. Now you tell me how you know about me. Can't do that, kid, Pike grinned. Let's just say that word gets around. Can't let you have all the luck. I figured you'd be glad to let your old pals in on your good fortune. And just how would I do that? When you become head mucky muck, you hire us to work for you easy like, and you pay us real good, and we keep your secret. Seems to me I've heard that offer before, and I'm beginning to think I don't have much of a secret anymore. Just how did you know? Let's just say a little bird told us, Pike chuckled. Yeah, Johnny thought. A Bascom bird. So, did you run off the herd last night or not? Could be, Pike shrugged. And did you leave someone behind to ambush King and me? What? I don't know anything about any ambush, kid. I see you're all right. How about the old man? Leg wound, but madder than hell. Once he's on his feet, all hell will break loose. Could have been a stroke of luck for us all if that ambusher had punched his ticket, Pike said. But once the trouble really starts, the old man might not be so lucky next time. Look, the kid said, his face twisted and contorted with rage. I don't want any harm to come to that old man. You understand me? What's the matter, kid? You gone soft on that old man? No, I just want to handle this my own way. Seth Bascom jerked awake in his bed as the door to his hotel burst open. The Laredo Kid had kicked it open, propped it shut with a chair, and sprang at the waking man in his bed. The kid's hands wrapped around Bascom's neck, lifting him to a sitting position and slamming his back violently against the wooden headboard. Bascom's fear-filled eyes bulged with the pressure on his throat, and his vocal cords could only make gurgling sounds, and his useless hands clawed at empty air. The kid's eyes were burning with anger as he pulled his captive close to his face and hissed. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's over. You hear me? He shook the man fiercely. Well, do you? Bascom nodded as best he could with what little head movement he was afforded. The kid released his hold and slammed the man back against the bed. His Colt seemed to leap from the holster, the muzzle pushing into the loose skin under Bascom's neck, and the hammer eared back to full cock with what seemed a deafening click. Bascom's eyeballs darted back and forth, and he cringed farther back into the mattress. Now you're going to do some talking, my friend, the kid growled. What's the deal? I told you, Bascom stammered. I just want part of the action when you get your hands on the royal crown. Then why did you tell King who I was? No, I didn't. Why would I do that? How else would he know about me? I don't know. Are you sure he does? Bascom was almost babbling now. He made a remark about me not being the Laredo Kid. It sounded like sarcasm to me, as if he knew I was. He knew Johnny Royal rode with the Laredo Kid. We found that in the letters he sent to his mother. Besides, King saw the real Laredo Kid before some years ago in Texas. He told me so when I showed him the letters. There's no way he'd suspect you of being the Laredo Kid. He might be doubtful about you, but that would be your own fault. The kid's eyes continued to blaze and his jaw clenched. Then, realizing that perhaps he had misread King's words, he eased off on the hammer and sat back on the bed. The real Laredo Kid, he thought. It had been so long now, he had almost forgotten that there really had been a Laredo Kid other than himself. His thoughts flashed back to that day he had switched identities with a dead man on the trail. It had been a terrible mistake, for he had inadvertently become the wrong man, becoming a wanted outlaw and gunman. He pulled the muzzle out from under Bascom's chin and placed it close to his face, so Bascom could see the gaping barrel with crossed eyes. "What do you know about the real Laredo Kid?" "Nothing. Nothing. Only what King said." "Did you tell Pike?" "No, I figured it didn't matter." "But you did bring Pike in on the deal?" the kid demanded. "Not at first. I didn't know who you were. As far as I knew, you were Johnny Royal. I really didn't care, but then I ran into Pike. He had seen us together in Denver and followed us here. When I found out who you were, I decided I could make some money by keeping your secret. But first, you were going to have to get control of the ranch for there to be any money. And Pike wanted part of the action," the kid finished for him. Bascom shook his head resolutely. "Was Pike in on the cattle rustling too?" "No, I'm sure that was Darrow's men." "Then Pike isn't working for Darrow?" "Not then, but he is now. The old man was in town yesterday afternoon and sent a wire to Cheyenne looking for gunmen. He saw Pike and his men and offered them a job," Bascom explained. "So they did attack our herd last night." "That's right," Bascom said. "The whole idea was to stir things up so King would ride against the arrow to hopefully, in the heat of battle, King Royal would run into a hunk, a lead." "I suppose that was the plan earlier this morning too," the kid interjected. "This morning? What are you talking about?" "Someone ambushed us on the trail to town and King took a bullet in the leg. He's over to Doc Tatum's now, getting patched up. Pike said his men weren't in on it." "Well, I sure as hell wasn't in on it. It would have made things simpler if whoever it was succeeded. Probably Darrow or his men." Then he added, "And you would have been a rich man. Don't knock it, kid." "Now you listen to me," the kid warned, eyes blazing. "I've got to stop this thing you started before it's too late, but I promise you, if anything happens to that old man that isn't natural, you're going to die, and I won't be sharing anything with anybody. You got that?" King was itchy. Doc Tatum had cleaned and bandaged the wound, and the elder Royal was beginning to feel like his usual self. The doc had offered him some of his best whiskey, for medicinal purposes, of course, he claimed, which King had downed greedily. He had just cursed Sheriff Ben Stryker out for suggesting that he stay in town, perhaps at the hotel until his wound healed. Stryker was just leaving through the doctor's front door, shaking his head as he met Johnny coming in. "Stubborn old fool," he muttered under his breath. "Tell me something we both don't already know," Johnny smiled. "Any luck following those men?" Stryker asked in a low voice, not wanting King to hear. "No, apparently they were headed south after all. Seemed to be in a big hurry. I trailed them a ways, but never did catch up to them. I guess we picked the wrong bunch while the others got away. Don't worry, Johnny, we'll get them." He changed his tone. "See if you can talk some sense into that old man, will you?" This he said loud enough for King to hear. "Old man, am I?" King blustered on Stryker's deaf ears as the door slammed shut behind him. He was still muttering to himself when Johnny stepped into the examining room. "How's he doing, Doc?" Johnny asked. "Don't ask him," King fumed. "Ask me. I'm the patient." "All right, how are you doing?" "Don't ask." He poured himself another drink from the doc's flask, downed it, and then leveled his gaze at Johnny. "Well, did you catch them?" "No," he answered regretfully. "I'm going back out just as soon as I get you settled." "Settled, hell? I'm going back to the ranch. If you think I'm staying here." Dr. Tatum cut him off short. "I'm telling you, King, it would be best if you stayed in town until it heals. You go riding around the country and work that wound open. Well, you know the problem you have with the blood clotting properly." King cast a nasty look at Tatum, and the doctor clamped his mouth shut as if he had spoken out of turn. "Never you mind. I'm going. Any old day, I can't sit a horse." He tried to slide off the examining table, but when his feet hit the floor, he winced with the suddenness of the pain. "How about I rent a rig and drive him home, Doc? Think he can handle that?" "As long as you can get him into and out again and drive careful, it should be all right." Then to King, "If I let you go as your son suggests, promise me you'll stay off your feet for at least a week." "All right, you drunken old sawbones, I promise." "King Royal," Tatum said, chastising him, "your promises are no damn good. You know it, and so do I." Chapter 15. "Why did you wait this long to tell me, Lila?" Florence demanded angrily. She paced back and forth on the living room floor. She whirled around to confront her daughter face to face up close. "You should have come to me with this right away." "I meant to, Mother, but I was afraid." "Afraid? Of what? Don't give me that. I know what you've been doing. You've been drooling over that young man ever since he came here. As long as you thought he was your brother, he was off limits. You've been angry with Heather on account of him." "Yes, you're right about that," Lila snapped. "She's been sneaking out at night and meeting him in the barn." "So, you're getting even with them both by coming to me with this story of yours?" "Maybe so, but it's true. I know what I heard that night in the kitchen. Elvira will tell you, he admitted he was an imposter." "And you thought that made him fair game for you?" Florence stated with annoyance. "That's why you didn't come to me. Isn't that so?" "I suppose so," Lila said meekly with a pout on her face. "You suppose so?" Florence repeated with disgust. "How in the world did you think you could accomplish anything by not telling someone?" I don't know. I didn't think." "You didn't think? Well, now we've got to think of what we're going to do about it now. King is soft on that boy." She thought a bit, then said, "What really bothers me is why didn't Elvira tell somebody?" "I don't know. Why don't you ask her?" It was dark by the time Johnny drove the rented carriage into the Royal Crown Ranch yard. The air had turned crisp and cool, with just a hint of a balmy spring scent, promising the coming of warmer weather. The sky was clear and studded with stars. The moon had grown from the sliver of the night before, approaching a full quarter moon. Earlier, when they left Doc Tatum's office, King had continued to fume and bluster, trying to hide his pain until Johnny had gotten him settled in the rig. But he became silent and sullen after Johnny whipped up the team and drove out of town with their saddle horses tied on behind. Neither man had spoken for the first mile or two. King had clutched at the package wrapped in brown paper that Doc Tatum had given him and stared blankly at the trail ahead. Johnny had driven on intently, thinking about the growing situation and trying to figure out how to counteract it. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, for he became more and more convinced that there was only one solution, if it was a solution at all. It would be dangerous, and he would be taking a tremendous risk that would expose him for who he really was. Then, finally, he made up his mind. He had to risk it. The decision was made. Florence, Heather, and Lila came running out of the front door as Johnny drove into the yard. Harka had been at the corrals. He slung the saddle he was carrying over a top rail and hurried toward the carriage. "Are you all right?" Flo asked as the ladies came close to the rig. "It's nothing," King said with irritation. "I'll tell you all about it later. Go inside. Harka will help me in." "How bad is it?" Lila asked. "I told you, I'll tell you all about it later. All of you get back inside." He waved his hand at them. "Go ahead, scat." Reluctantly, they pulled back. Johnny noticed Heather tossing him a wan smile as she left. Lila cocked her head haughtily and swept away with an expression of deep consternation. Harka came alongside and said something low to King. King nodded, pursed his lips, and grimaced. "You did right, Harka," King said. "I wouldn't have wanted you to go any farther." He turned to Johnny and sighed deeply with disgust. I'm afraid it was Luke who shot at us this morning, he said dejectedly. Harka picked up his trail and followed him toward the wishbone. Looks like one of you nicked him. There was blood on the trail. I'm sorry, King, Johnny said. I never thought he hated me enough to kill me. King shook his head. I think he was after me, not you. Doesn't make any difference, King brooded. He was silent for a moment, then said, I hate to ask this of you, Johnny. It's dangerous up on the wishbone. If Corday catches him around there, he'll blow the young fool's head off. I want you to go bring him home. He'll have to be the one to tell his mother. She'll never believe me. I'll ride out just as soon as I get you in the house, Johnny said. No, get going. Harka will help me. She was always early. Every night after her father and brother went to sleep, Millie had slipped out to meet Luke Thorne in the little clearing by the pond, and she would wait eagerly for him to arrive. But this night, it was different. As she approached the clearing, she heard Luke's horse nicker, and then, as she came through the brush, she could see the dark shape of the animal tethered to a low-hanging tree branch. Her heart began to race with excitement. He was already there, waiting for her. She ran forward with anticipation and burst out of the brush into the clearing. There he was, sitting beneath that old locust tree where they had spent so many hours. His back was against the tree trunk, and his head was slumped forward. She ran quickly to him, falling on her knees, throwing herself against him, and wrapping her arms around his neck, holding tight against him. But something seemed to be wrong. He was totally unresponsive at first. Then his head moved upwards. She pushed back from him, and for the first time, she saw the glaze in his eyes. She pulled back and realized her arms, hands, and blouse were sticky and covered with blood. She looked down and saw the wound in Luke's left shoulder. The shirt was torn, and the wound was caked with dirt. Blood was dripping down his shirt front. Luke, she gasped. What happened? Who did this? Johnny shot me, he murmured. Millie's face twisted. I'll kill him for this, Luke, she blurted. I'll do that myself, Luke promised. His breathing was hard and labored. Luke, we've got to get you to a doctor. No, his weak voice rasped. Can't let King know, can't let my mother know. But Luke, it looks bad. Looks worse than it is. I'm just weak from loss of blood. The bullet bounced off the bone and came out through the top of my shoulder. As long as I don't get infection and I rest up, I'll be all right. Luke winced as he shifted his weight against the tree. I tried to clean it with pond water, but it hasn't helped much. I need antiseptic or alcohol to swab it out. I'll go back to the house and look for something. If nothing else, will whiskey work? He forced a grin. Whiskey will work just fine. You think you can sneak back in and out again without your brother and Pa catching you? I don't know. I'll have to try. She pushed herself to her feet and started off through the brush. Hurry, Luke muttered after her. Johnny approached the Corday ranch house carefully, angling his horse along in the shadows of a line of cottonwood trees. He reined up behind shoulder-high scrub brush about 50 yards from the barn, where he could get a good view of the house, barn, and corral. All looked quiet as it should for this time of night. The house was completely dark, as if everyone was asleep for the night. The only hope he had of finding Luke was through Millie. He would have to wait and watch until Millie made a move. That may not be until morning, but this was the only way. He slouched in the saddle and watched for a while. The night dragged on slowly and silently. Soon he started to doze, but his horse began to move and stamp about. He jerked awake and decided he might as well settle down for the night. He dismounted and led his bronc further back into the bushes, picketed him near a patch of green grass, and returned to the place of vigilance. He stretched out on the ground and had just started to doze off when he heard footsteps in the brush on the other side of the corral. He jolted alert and waited. A dark figure appeared in the ranch yard. As it came closer toward the house, he could make out the slim, lithe figure of a woman. Millie Corday! She must have been out meeting with Luke and on her way back. He would have to catch her before she got to the house and force her to lead him to Luke. But he would have to do it silently enough not to wake up the Corday men, and he was far enough away that he may not be able to reach her without her seeing his approach. He slid out from his hiding place, and keeping toward the shadows, he edged out, circling the yard and creeping closer. If only he could get close enough, soon enough. He tried not to rush it, but he found he was moving faster than was prudent. Fortunately, Millie was approaching the house slowly also, careful not to make any noise that may arouse her father and brother. As she angled to the front of the house and approached the porch, she had turned her back on Johnny. He sprang forward, throwing his left arm around her neck and clamping his right hand over her mouth. "Don't make a sound," he ordered in a whisper. The attack was so sudden, she didn't stop to think. She just reacted. She twisted and turned, kicking her feet wildly in midair as Johnny lifted her off the ground. Her teeth bit down on Johnny's hand, and he released the pressure enough that she let out a scream. She kicked his shin, and he staggered back a step or two. "That tears it," he cursed, realizing that men in the shack might have heard her. He quickly clamped her mouth shut again, in such a way that she couldn't bite, and started to drag her backwards across the yard into the shadows. Light filled the front room window as a lantern was lit. The door burst open. There stood Sam Corday, grizzled and unkempt as usual, and there was that big double-barreled shotgun again, in his burly hands. "Who's there? Stand still or I'll shoot," he warned with his deep, raspy voice. Johnny froze. He knew Corday would do as he said, even without seeing that his own daughter was in the line of fire. "Don't shoot," Johnny shouted. "You'll hit Millie." "Millie?" Corday repeated, stepping off the porch, trying to peer into the darkness. Larry came out behind him, carrying a lantern held high. Its light spread out across the yard, and now Johnny and Millie could be seen plainly. "What's going on here?" Sam Corday bellowed. When he realized there was blood all over the front of her blouse, he said, "Millie, what's happened to you? Are you all right? You're covered with blood." "I'm all right, Pa. It's not my blood." "Who's that with you?" "It's Johnny Royal," she shouted. "He shot Luke Thorne." "Luke Thorne?" the old man repeated. "Girl, I told you to stay away from him." "I came here to get Luke," Johnny shouted, still holding the girl in front of him as a shield. "He shot King today and took a hit himself. Harka saw him come this way. I came up here to bring him back. Millie knows where he's at." "Is that right, Millie? You have that varmint hid out around here?" "No," she lied. She couldn't let either her father or Johnny Royal find him. One or the other of them was sure to finish the job. "He's dead." "Good," Corday laughed. "2 Royals in one day, and maybe I'm going to get me a third right now." "You'll have to shoot through your daughter to get me, Corday," Johnny warned. "Go ahead, Pa. Shoot him. Don't worry about me," Millie ordered. "Shoot right through me if you have to. I don't care anymore. Just kill him." "Maybe I should shoot you after all, girl. Disobeying me like you done." "Just let her show me where the body is, Sam. Then I'll send her back to you and I'll get off your land. I don't want any shooting here, but I will if I have to." "You take my daughter, I go too," Corday answered. "Fair enough," Johnny said. "But that thunder stick of yours stays here." "No deal. It comes with me. I won't use it unless you force me." The hackles on the back of Johnny's neck bristled. He knew he shouldn't trust the old man, but he didn't want to fight with him either. "Okay," he agreed, knowing the better of it. "But Millie stays between us." "Deal," Corday answered. He lowered his weapon and released the hammers slowly. Then, to Millie, "Where's the body, girl?" Millie's mind was racing now. She could feel her heart pounding against her chest. She couldn't tell them the truth. Or could she? Luke was still conscious. He still had a gun. If she could warn him somehow, Maybe he could get the drop on Johnny. But what about her pa? She didn't know. She was confused. Think about it later. She blurted, "He's at the pond." "You stay here, son," Corday said to Larry and stepped off the porch. As they neared the clearing by the pond, Millie spoke loudly, hoping Luke would hear them coming. She tried to make as much noise in the brush as possible. "It's not much farther now, Johnny," she said, making it clear who was with her. "And Pa, you won't need that shotgun. Luke's dead." Corday was a dense man and made nothing of Millie's babble, but Johnny picked up on it right away. He was sure now that Luke was still alive, and Millie was trying to warn him while she led Johnny and her father into a trap. Johnny knew he would have to play along and be ready for whatever might happen. As they came out of the brush, Johnny was ready. Nothing happened. He could see Luke sitting motionless against the tree trunk, his head slumped forward, his hands between his legs. Millie's heart leaped in her breast. Was it already too late? Was Luke really dead? Oh God, no! She prayed. She wanted to run to him, but she didn't want to show her surprise that he might indeed be dead. Johnny felt a pang of guilt. Just last night he had beat the boy with a rock and left him lying on the trail awaiting torrential rain. He felt bad for Luke's mother and for King, too. What was the matter with him? He was getting soft, he told himself, and that could get him killed. He hurried over to Luke and kneeled down in front of him. Luke didn't move. Johnny placed 2 fingers under Luke's chin and lifted his head. Luke's eyes were closed. Johnny sighed remorsefully. Millie had told the truth. Luke was dead. Johnny's shoulders sagged and he lowered his eyes. In that split second, Luke's eyes popped wide open. A large grin spread across his face, and his hand from beneath his legs came up like a flash, pressing the muzzle of a Colt under Johnny's chin. The hammer eared back with a loud click. "Surprise, brother boy," Luke taunted, then coughed spasmodically. Millie almost fainted, but pure joy kept her on her feet. Tears streamed down her face. Sam Corday stepped back, raising his shotgun. "Not really," Johnny said. "Should have known you couldn't die. Can't go to heaven and the devil wouldn't want you." Luke choked out a sardonic chuckle. Then, looking past Johnny at Sam Corday moving forward, he warned, "Stay where you are, old man. I don't want to hurt you. I just want Johnny." Corday stepped back and lowered his weapon. "Now, brother boy, very carefully, unbuckle your gun belts and toss them aside." He eased back on the pressure of the gun barrel against Johnny's chin, letting him lean back and reach his buckles. Johnny did his bidding and let the belt slide away from him. "Good boy," Luke chided over another choking cough. "Now let's see if the devil wants you." His finger tightened on the trigger, taking up the slack. His pale knuckles turned even whiter. He squeezed the trigger. Flame shot from the muzzle, and the sound was deafening at such close range. The bullet plunged into the dirt next to Johnny as Luke choked one more time, eyes widening, then eyelids fluttering shut as his body stiffened and pitched forward, crumpling into a heap in Johnny's lap. "Luke!" Millie screamed and started to run forward, but her father reached out with one hand and pulled her back. "Stay back, girl," he ordered. "Looks like he's really dead this time." He laughed. No, it can't be," Millie sobbed. Johnny pushed Luke's head away from him and reached for his pistol belts. "Just let them lay right where they are, Mr. Royal," Corday gloated as Johnny stared into the gaping double barrels. Chapter 16. The door to King's room burst open and slammed shut as Flo swept in, her skirts rustling and her shoes pounding against the pine floor. Her face was screwed up into a furious scowl. She was angry, good and whopping mad. King sat up in his bed. He had seen this behavior all too many times before, but in his present condition, he was more annoyed than usual. "King," she blurted, "I need to talk to you." Well, go ahead and talk, woman, and get it over with. Then leave me alone. I'll leave you alone, all right, King Royal, just as soon as I tell you a thing or two about that young man you brought here. What are you talking about, woman? He was far beyond annoyed now. He's an imposter. He's not your son, you old fool. How could you be so stupid? What are you talking about? Where'd you get a fool notion like that? He admitted it. Florence lifted her chin haughtily. To Elvira? Elvira? King laughed. Is that what she told you? You know how she tells stories. You can't shrug this off so easily, King. Lila overheard them talking. Lila? When did all this happen? Last week, Florence answered. Last week? And she's telling us about it now. Why would she have kept quiet all this time? Are you sure you're not making all this up? King was incredulous. No, I'm not making it up. Why would I do that? You just might think that if he's not my son, you might still wind up with the royal crown when I'm gone, King said flatly. You'll never die, you old fool, Flo bellowed. At least, not soon enough for you, my dear. Then, he added, but don't concern yourself. Son or not, you'll never get control of the ranch. You'd rather leave it to a total stranger? A con man? No, I'm leaving it to my son, and he is my son. Seth Bascom checked him out thoroughly. He had all the papers to prove it, King said. And I'm satisfied. Well, I'm not. She whirled and stormed out of the room in a huff. Johnny paced back and forth within the confines of the 4-by-6-foot tack room inside the Corday barn. He had been locked in here for more than 2 hours now since Sam Corday had gotten the drop on him down by the pond. It was still as dark as night in here, for there were no windows in the little room. He could tell it was nearing morning, though, for he could see the start of the faint light of dawn creeping through the wallboards to the back and side of him. The air was dry and dusty, filled with the smell of grain and hay dust. Sam had locked him in this tack room and left Larry standing guard outside. Sam never could think for himself, so he had ridden off to the Arrow D to find out what Darrow thought they should do with this newfound opportunity. Millie had fallen to pieces over Luke, and her father had had no sympathy for her. He had told her Luke got what he deserved, and she would be better off without him. When she had become angry with him, he had locked her in her room to settle her down until he got back. She lay on her bed and sobbed into her pillow, her shoulders shaking convulsively until she became so fatigued that she finally succumbed to sleep. When she finally awoke, it was with a start. Then a peace fell over her as she decided she must be dreaming. There, lying on the bed next to her, was Luke. Her Luke. If only he were real. Johnny was becoming frustrated. He had to escape somehow before Corday and Darrow returned. But how? He tried to push out the wallboard at the rear of the tack room, but nothing budged. He felt around the walls of the tack, looking for anything he could use as a tool to try to pry a wallboard loose, but found nothing but splinters in his hand for his trouble. No use. He was a prisoner until Sam Corday returned. Florence was up before dawn. She was going to get to the bottom of this charade and prove that the man calling himself Johnny Royal really was a fake. She was going to town and confront Seth Bascom. She would need someone to drive her, so she went to Luke's room and found he was not there. Her temper was flaring more now. The fool, she thought. She was sure he was with Millie Corday. If only there was some way to put a stop to that nonsense before he found himself in big trouble. She would deal with that problem later, though. For now, she would have to roust one of the hands to hitch up a team to the buggy and drive her into town. The sun was up and promising a warm day by the time she got to town. She went straight to the hotel. The desk clerk told her that Mr. Bascom was still in his room and had given strict orders not to be disturbed until afternoon. She refused to take no for an answer. After checking the register for Bascom's room number, She stalked on up the stairs, ignoring the protesting clerk. Bascom groaned and rolled over in his bed. There was pounding on his door. "Go away," he mumbled into his pillow. The pounding continued, getting louder by the minute. "Go away," Bascom shouted, and threw the wash basin from the stand near his bed at the door. It clanked loudly against the panel and bounced twice on the wooden floor. The pounding continued, and an angry woman's voice shouted, "Open up! It's Florence Royal, and I've got to speak to you." The sound of the tack room door being unlocked and opening awakened Johnny from his dozing as he sat on the floor against the back wall of the room. Light streamed in from the opening doorway, and although not direct sunlight, it had an almost blinding effect as Johnny squinted his eyes open and closed repeatedly, trying to adapt from the pitch blackness to the light. "Bring him out," Johnny heard a voice say just before the backlit shadow of a man stepped into the open doorway. He was still trying to adjust to the change in light when he felt hands grasping the inside of his collar and yanking him to his feet, dragging him forward and literally throwing him through the doorway to land on the straw-covered floor of the barn. He landed hard, rolled once onto his back. From his vantage point, he could see several men standing over him and on all sides. As his eyes focused, he recognized the man in dark clothing who had dragged him out of the tack room. It was Pike Grant. His face was passive and showed no emotion. Just a hired tough doing his job. On each side of him was Harvey Darrow and Sam Corday, respectively. They were both smiling with delight. He couldn't see the men behind him, but he guessed they were the rest of Grant's gang. "Well, young Mr. Royal," Darrow chuckled. "Looks like you've gotten yourself into a real fix." Johnny pushed himself up into a half-sitting position, propping himself up, leaning on both hands, splayed against the floor. "I guess that depends on what you intend to do to me," Johnny quipped belligerently. "Do to you?" Darrow grinned. "I guess I have to think about that." After a pause, he said, "How about we start with a little patty cake? Pike, soften him up a little." Before he knew it, Pike had hauled him off the floor again and shoved him backward. He fell into the arms of two men behind him, and they held him tight. Pike moved in and slammed a right-handed fist into the pit of Johnny's stomach. Bile rose in his throat, and he felt nauseated. Air had been completely driven from his lungs, and his chest ached. He doubled over, unable to fall as the two men held him up. Pike swung again, this time a roundhouse blow to the side of the head. Pike cocked his arm to swing again when Darrow stopped him. "That'll be enough, for now. Let him go." As the men released him, Johnny's knees buckled, and he crumpled to the floor. He lay there several moments, grasping his aching midsection, writhing and groaning until his head began to clear. He lay there on his side, glaring up at his captor. "Gonna kill him, Harv?" Sam Corday said eagerly. "In due time, Sam. Don't get impatient." "Impatient? Hell, Harv, why don't you just shoot him and get it over with?" "Because I don't go around murdering people. That's why. If you want to do it, be my guest," Darrow said indignantly. "Well, no. I mean, I know what you mean. You're stupid. That's why you came to me." "But what are we going to do with him then?" "I don't know," Darrow answered. "But there has got to be a way to use him against King Royal. I don't think he'd want anything to happen to his son." "Not his son," Darrow heard Johnny croak feebly. "What?" Darrow's eye narrowed, and he looked to the other men. "What did he say?" "I'm not his son," Johnny repeated with a groan. Pike's passive expression changed to one of concern. Was the kid going to spill it all and queer the deal? "Get him up," Darrow ordered. "Someone, get him some water, quick." Corday motioned to Larry, and he hobbled out of the barn. They were just getting Johnny propped up on a pile of hay when Larry returned with a pail of water from the well. Darrow took it, scooped a dipper full out, and held it to Johnny's lips. Johnny coughed on the first swallow, and the water dripped down the sides of his mouth onto the front of his shirt. It was several minutes before Johnny began to revive, but his breathing was still labored. "Now," Darrow demanded, impatience in his voice. "What's this about not being King's son? Am I right that you're a hired gun that King brought in?" Pike's dark brows pulled together. "Don't spill it, kid," he was thinking. Johnny looked up into his face and could see the apprehension. "No," Johnny answered. Pike stiffened, getting ready. "I am Johnny Royal, though. That's what my mother named me, but she always hinted that King Royal was not my father." Johnny was grasping at straws now, but something had been nagging at him ever since he learned about the Darrow and King feud, and now might be the time to fish it out. Pike let out a breath and tried not to show his relief. "That's why King sent us away. My mother had to work hard, scrimp and save to raise me. So, you see, I have no affection for King Royal. I'm here because I want what belongs to me. For some reason, he's given up the notion that I was not his son. I guess he's just getting old and wants to think he has someone to pass the ranch on to. From what I've seen of his family, I'd say he's not a happy man." "He's a miserable old curmudgeon," Darrow interjected. "Who knows what he really thinks or wants?" Then he changed his tone. "So, did your mother ever tell you who your real father was?" Something in Harvey Darrow's voice told Johnny he was on the right track. "No, but I gathered she was in love with you at one time." Darrow's expression didn't change, as if he had expected to hear this. He said nothing to confirm nor deny the insinuation. Darrow stood up and paced back and forth, rubbing the back of his neck. "When King's gone," Johnny was speaking louder and stronger now, "you and I will own this entire section." Darrow swung around abruptly. He understood the insinuation, and a plan began to form in his brain. "If you think I'm your father, why'd you shoot my men and why'd you throw down on me the other day?" "Someone hauls leather against me, I shoot them," Johnny said. "Besides, King expects me to side with him, and I want to keep him thinking so until the right time." "Meaning?" "Meaning, I don't get control of the royal crown until King's dead, and I want to handle that in my own time and in my own way. You won't need any hired gunmen. If you hadn't started this range war business, I might have gotten the job done by now. I wanted to arrange an accident so no one would suspect foul play, like a stampede or mountain lion. Now he's laid up with a wounded leg, and I'll have to wait for it to heal before I can get him back out on the range. That will probably be at least a week, if not 2, Johnny said evenly. His gaze strayed from Darrow to Pike. There was no response from any of the men. Johnny added, "So, are you going to kill me now or let me get back to my job?" "Are you going to believe this hogwash, Harv?" Corday put in. "I say we kill him now and send Luke's and his bodies back to King Royal. Let him know we mean business." "No, I think it might be better if Johnny takes Luke's body back himself," Darrow said thoughtfully. "But Harv," Corday started to plead. "Sam, do as I say. Trust me." It was more of an order. "All right," Corday conceded. "I sure hope you know what you're doing." "Don't worry," Darrow assured him. "I do." There was a glint in his eye. Then, turning back to Johnny, "All right, Johnny. I'll play along with you for a while. 2 weeks, no more." "And you'll back off on this range war business?" "Just as long as King doesn't push it," Darrow said. "I'll see to it that he doesn't," Johnny promised with a touch of ice in his voice. He glanced again at Pike. Pike cast a wry half-smile. He had to admire the kid. He had just weaseled out of a bad situation. He didn't know what the kid was up to, but he had sure played his cards right this time. "I'll need my guns back," Johnny said, directing it to Sam Corday. Corday looked to Darrow. "Yes, Sam," Harvey answered the unspoken question. "Give them back to him." "Oh, all right, but I don't like it," he grumbled. Then, to Johnny, "Come on up to the house and I'll get them for you." Harvey Darrow, Pike Grant, and his compadres were mounted on their horses and sat there for a moment watching Sam Corday leading Johnny toward the weather-beaten ranch house. Larry hobbled along behind, unable to keep up. Sam may need watching a bit, Pike. I wouldn't want him to go off half-cocked and do something to Johnny, and I sure as hell don't want him spilling the beans to anyone about what happened out here today. So hang around for a while until Johnny leaves. Sure thing, boss. But there is one thing I want to know. The whole conversation between Darrow and the kid had been nagging at Pike. This was something Bascom would need to know for sure. He said to Darrow, "Are you really Johnny's father?" Darrow laughed. "No. But as long as he thinks so, things might just work out easier than I had hoped." Chapter 17. Luke's body was gone, and so was his horse. The open area around the pond was empty. There were no tracks to indicate that a body had been dragged away. All of this confirmed Johnny's suspicions of what he would find. He was convinced now that Luke was not dead. He had merely passed out, probably from loss of blood and lack of food and water. When Sam Corday had led Johnny into the house to retrieve his pistols, Sam had become outraged to find the door to Millie's room standing open and Millie gone. "It's all your fault," Sam raged. "You and the rest of your Royal Crown bunch. Now she's run off and left me. What the hell am I supposed to do now?" He was almost crying. Larry came forward, resting his one arm on Sam's shoulder. "Don't w worry, Papa," he tried to console him. "She's just angry. She'll get over it, and she'll come back." "She'd better," Corday fumed at Johnny, "or I'll come after you. Now take your guns and get out." In his rage, Sam Corday had only seen that Millie was gone, but Johnny had seen much more. He had seen the half-empty whiskey bottle on the table, along with a dirty plate and water glass. These in themselves might not have meant anything, for they could have been used by the Cordays earlier, but Johnny did not remember seeing them there the night before, prior to being locked in the tack room. The sheets on Millie's bed had been torn to shreds, and there were blood spots on the floor which had led in through the front door into Millie's room and back to the table. Now, here by the pond, Johnny was convinced that Luke had revived and somehow made it to the house. Millie had tended his wounds with alcohol and torn bandages from her bedsheets. She had given him food and water. When he was finally strong enough to ride, they both left together. A sound of brush rustling behind him brought Johnny around abruptly. His pistol was half out of his holster as Pike Grant rode into the open area. "You won't need that, kid," Pike said with a grin. The kid let the pistol drop back into leather, but he kept his fingers wrapped around the gun butt. "So, there's no body. Surprise! Surprise!" Pike chided. "Guess he ran off with the girl, huh?" "Looks like it. Darrow send you after me?" "No, I'm supposed to be watching Corday." "Seen to it that he don't shoot you," Pike chuckled. Then he said, "Sorry about that beating I gave you. Had to make it look good, you know." The kid nodded. "You're smart, kid. Making the old man think you're his son, just so he'd let you go." "I wasn't so sure it would work. I was just guessing." "Well, don't congratulate yourself too soon, kid," Pike said. "Johnny wasn't his son, and Darrow knows it. He thinks he's playing you." The kid laughed. "As long as it worked." "So where does that leave us, kid?" Pike asked icily. "You playing along with us now, or are you playing us too?" "I admit I had other plans, but now I see that I have to take care of the Arrow D and Wishbone problems too. I might just as well get those ranches while I'm at it. After all, I've got so many partners now, I guess I'm going to need all the land I can get. So, tell Bascom I'm ready to do it his way." "Now you're getting smart, kid," Pike grinned, but to himself he didn't trust the kid one bit. Florence had just returned from town and was getting out of the buggy when she saw Johnny riding in. She lifted her skirts above the ankles so she could run without tripping over her hem. Johnny reined up abruptly as she came into his path. The horse shied to the side, kicking up dust. What's wrong? Something happened to King? Johnny asked. You'd like that, wouldn't you, Sonny? Well, let me tell you, I'm on to you and you're not going to get away with it. That Basco man is in this with you. I don't believe a word he says. I'll have you off this range if I have to carry your dead carcass off myself. She whirled and sped back to the house, went inside, and slammed the door behind her. Now what was that all about? Johnny thought. It sounded like she knew he wasn't Johnny Royal. Well, what the hell? He thought. Join the crowd. Lila came out the front door and came toward him. He dismounted and held the reins. What's gotten into your mother? He asked. She found out you're not my brother, she said meekly. I'm not, Johnny asked jokingly. Then who am I? I don't know. You tell me. I'm afraid I don't understand, Johnny said innocently. I heard you talking to Elvira last week, she said. I'm not so sure what you heard, but if it led you to believe that I'm not who I say I am, I guess you must have told your mother. Is that why she's so mad at me? Yes, I'm sorry I told her, but I was angry with you and Heather. It all started to make sense to him now. She must have seen him with Heather the other night when they came out of the barn. Why? She means nothing to me. Besides, you're all family here. Well, Heather thinks because there is no blood ties between you and her that you are fair game. When I heard you with Elvira, I was glad you really weren't my brother. That's why I didn't tell on you right away. Because you also thought I was fair game, Johnny added. Well, yes, she said demurely, looking down at the ground. Lila, Johnny said, I'm flattered, but you ought to know, Heather and you both ought to know that I'm not fair game for anyone. You've stirred up a hornet's nest and upset your mother needlessly. As I remember it right, Elvira said she didn't think I was the baby she held years ago. I didn't say she was right, and I didn't say she was wrong. The thing you all have to understand is that King brought me here to be a son to him. Whether Florence wants to believe that or not, that's what I'm here for, and I intend to stay, at least for a while. I'm sorry, Johnny, she whispered. I didn't mean... I know what you didn't mean. Now, if you can, I hope you will try to convince your mother that you made a mistake. He lifted her chin with one finger and smiled into her big, sad eyes. I'm not mad at you, and if it will make you feel better, there are times when I wish I wasn't your brother too. Now go on back inside. I'll be in as soon as I tend to my horse. Elvira was in the vestibule when Johnny stepped through the door. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnny, she said almost in tears. I didn't say nothing to get you in trouble. I like you. I know, Elvira, Johnny said reassuringly as he patted her on the back. None of it was your fault. We'll get it straightened out. I hope so, sir. I don't want you to go away. Don't worry, he assured her again. Then said, Is King still in his room? No, sir, Mr. Johnny. He's sitting up in his study. He seems to be feeling much better. At least until she came home. She's in there with him right now, madder than a wet hen. He don't like for her to go into his study anyways, but I sure bet he's more than annoyed this time. Maybe I ought to go in and rescue him. What do you think, Elvira? I think that crazy woman in there will chew you to pieces. Maybe I won't taste so good, he said, and crossed the room to the study door. I tell you, King, you've been swindled. That Bascom and that young whelp have been... She was blustering as Johnny opened the door. She started for him, her hand raised. Florence, King shouted from his leather chair behind the desk with his most commanding voice. Florence halted briefly. Just settle down, King ordered, and get out of here. I'll take care of this. Then to Johnny, Johnny, you stay here. Florence has made some accusations and I want to get to the bottom of it. Florence glared at Johnny, then back to King and back to Johnny again. Go on, Florence, King said more calmly but firmly. We'll talk later. She started to say something, then thought better of it. Her ruffled feathers a bit soothed, then left with a huff, but feeling she had finally convinced the stubborn old man to take some action against this impostor. Johnny closed the door behind her and turned to King with a slight grin of amusement on his face. King reached into a side drawer and pulled out one of the flasks that Doc Tatum had bundled in the package he brought home. He unscrewed the top, took a snort, and recapped it. "I suppose you know what's been happening here?" "I got the gist of it," Johnny said. "Florence doesn't want to believe you are my son. She sees you as a threat to her inheritance. We'll deal with that later, though. What about Luke? Did you find him?" Florence was pacing back and forth in the living room when Johnny emerged from the study, whisked past her, and left quickly through the front door. A moment later, King Royal appeared. A crutch was under his arm, and he hobbled unsteadily toward her. His face was filled with pain, but she read it as anger and disappointment. "Well?" Florence demanded. "Did you get rid of him?" "Yes, for now anyways, until he and Bascom can come up with more proof. Does that satisfy you?" "Just as long as he's gone and not coming back," she said. "Speaking of being gone and not coming back, I've got something to tell you. You'd better sit down." The gravity in his voice sent chills up and down her spine. What is it?" Her eyes widened as she imagined all sorts of things. "Sit down," he ordered again in the same voice. She moved to a large overstuffed chair and reluctantly lowered herself into it, waiting. King shifted his weight and moved the crutch to a more comfortable position. "It's Luke," he started. Florence's heart leapt. She suddenly felt short of breath. "He's been continuing to see the Corday girl," King started to explain. Florence felt a sudden sense of relief and forced a thin smile. Is that all?" she replied. She had suspected that right along, and even though she didn't like it, it was preferable to some other awful fate that could have befallen her son. "No, that's not all," King said grimly. "I'm afraid Luke and the girl have run off together." "I don't believe that for 1 minute. My son wouldn't run off and leave me," she scoffed. "Is that what that shyster young man told you? The man's a liar. Surely you don't believe him? Then why haven't we seen Luke lately? Where is he?"